Will Goldstein here, thekingscourt.com. Again, there's a chance to subscribe down there by hitting that little button there. And you can always check out my music, thekingscourt.com, my digital albums and my songbooks. Probably in the next few days, week or so, maybe tomorrow or the next day, who knows. I'll be releasing another album, so if you want to check that out, it's All Hail the King, All Hail Messiah. It takes a while, a few days, but in a week or two it'll be out on the market. So anyway, this video is going to be on Christian marriage. But before I get into that, there's 2 points I would like to make. One of them is Lewis wrote this, which is based on his recordings before he was married. However, he was subsequently married for 4 years to Joy Davidman, who died of cancer. Shadowlands is a great movie to watch. Anthony Hopkins plays C.S. Lewis in that, but that tells a little bit of that story. And also, as the second point is I was married for 32 years. However, after much effort, I tried to save my marriage, but for various reasons, I am divorced, as it takes two people to be married. Though divorced, I do not believe in Christian divorce, and never dreamed I would be in such a state, though I cannot say I had a particularly good marriage. As all marriages go, it has its ups and downs, some more down than up. It takes two willing, humble, loving, and forgiving hearts to make a good and lasting marriage. And now, 10 years later, with a smile still on my face, I'll proceed to this video on Christian marriage. And so I think this is number 17. Lewis starts off by saying in the last video, he said it was mainly negative. That's his interpretation of it. But he discussed, all the things that was wrong with the sexual impulse in man, and in some ways little about it is working. Lewis says he's not particularly fond of wanting to deal with the subject of marriage, again, because he wasn't married at the time. And that's what he says. It's an extremely unpopular topic because of what Christians say about the topic of marriage in some aspects. Then he goes on to say he's never been married, but like I said, he was eventually married. In spite of that, he feels that he cannot leave the subject untouched because it has to do with Christian morals. So the Christian idea of marriage is a man and his wife are regarded as a single organism. That's what the words that he uses. One flesh is what the Bible says. And then he goes on to say, like a lock and its key, or a violin and a bow is one instrument. So they're working together. Male and female were made to be combined, not simply on the sexual level. And then he uses the word, the monstrosity of sexual intercourse outside of marriage is those who indulge in it are trying to isolate one kind of union, meaning the sexual union, from all the other aspects and kinds of union that were intended to exist within the marriage. The Christian attitude about sexual pleasure means that you must not isolate that pleasure and try to get it by itself. In other words, it's the whole package, not just part of it. Christianity teaches that marriage is for life. All regard divorce as something like cutting up a living body. Believe me, for the first year or so that I went through divorce, it was hell, especially for the first several months. it's pretty much just like he said, it's cutting up a living body. It's kind of a surgical operation. Some think the operation so violent it cannot be done at all. Others admit it as a remedy in extreme cases. They all disagree with the modern view that readjustment of partners to be made whenever people are no longer in love, or either of them happens to fall in love with someone else. We will consider the modern view and consider it in relation to another virtue, namely justice, and the idea of keeping promises. Everyone married in a church has made a public, solemn promise. Partners till death. I did the same thing. And someone may reply, well, the promise made in church is just a mere formality. It was never intended to keep it. And then he says, well, whom then was he trying to deceive? God? And then he says, that's very unwise. Was he trying to deceive himself? Well, that's not much wiser. If he was trying to deceive the bride or the in-laws, this is treachery. Maybe he was trying to deceive the public. And the reason why is they wanted the respectability attached to marriage without really paying the price. They were, in fact, imposters, and they cheated. If they are still contented to be cheats, well, then Lewis has nothing to say to them. If people do not believe in permanent marriage, it's perhaps better that they should live together unmarried. I was a little surprised that he said that. But, he has reasons for saying that. He thinks it would be better to live together unmarried than to make these vows that do not mean to be kept. Living together without marriage, in the Christian eyes, is fornication. So he's not in any way advocating it. But then he goes on to say, but unchastity is not improved by adding perjury. Interesting. I'm not reading this, I'm kind of paraphrasing it. I'm leaving out certain aspects of it. The idea that being in love is the only reason for remaining married leaves no room for any promise at all. If love is the whole thing, then the promise can really add nothing to it at all. It should never be made. And then he goes on to say, Chesterton pointed out, those in love have a natural inclination. They want to bind themselves with these promises. And then people write love songs, and they're done all over the world, and they're full of these vows of eternal constancy. Well, the Christian law is that lovers should take seriously what their passion is, and that passion impels them to do. And to be true as long as I live is to commit one to being true even if I cease to be in love. And I would say that at the moment the person might cease to be in love. What is the nature of love? He's kind of getting that. There's different aspects of love. A promise about actions, no one can promise to go on feeling a certain way, so he's getting at what I just said. It may be asked, what is the use of keeping people together if they no longer are in love? And then he goes on to say, well, there are several reasons for that. There's social reasons, there's the home that is to be considered, the children and the raising of the children, the protection of the woman from being dropped by any man who finds some other woman, then he gets tired of her and wants to go after her, or vice versa. We call being in love a glorious state. It opens our eyes not only to the beloved, but to all beauty. It subordinates our animal sexuality, and love is the conqueror, the great conqueror of lust. Being in love is really a good thing. But then he goes on to say, but it's not the best thing. You can't make it the basis of your whole entire life. Some people do, and that can be very burdensome on the partner. No feeling can be relied on to last in its full intensity. Everybody's experienced the initial time of love, and then it sort of wears out after a while. And then there's the reality that now that we're here together, right? So feelings come and go. Ceasing to be in love need not mean to cease to love. That's an interesting statement. Love is distinct from being in love. What he's getting at is he's getting at the difference between the commitment of love versus the infatuation of love. Love is not merely a feeling. It is a deep unity maintained by the strength of habit. It's reinforced by grace from God. To love even at the moments when we do not like each other. And as you love yourself, that's the way you should love your partner. Even when you do not like yourself, you still love yourself, is what he's trying to say. Being in love first moved these people to promise their fidelity. So they should keep in that fidelity and try to rediscover that. People get from books the idea if you're married to the right person, you may expect being in love is going to last forever. When they are not feeling that way, this proves that they have made a great mistake and are now entitled to a change, not realizing the glamour of it all can come and go with this new love, and as it went out with the old one, it probably will go out with that kind of attitude with the new one. The thrills just come and they do not last. The dying away of the first thrill in marriage will be compensated really by a more lasting kind of interest that you have in each other. People who are ready to submit to the loss of the thrill are those that settle down eventually and are more likely to actually meet new thrills. In other words, they're not seeking it. They're more interested in being committed to one another, and in that reality, they find new thrills. So Jesus or Christ said, a thing will not really live unless it first dies. So let the thrill go. Through that period of death, there comes a quieter interest and a happiness that will follow. And you'll find that new thrills are possible all the time with that sort of attitude. Another notion from novels and plays is that falling in love is an irresistible thing, and that it just happens. And because they believe this, some people they give in when they find themselves attracted to any new acquaintance. These irresistible passions are much rarer, he says, in real life. This is fairy tale stuff. You find somebody and you're just thrilled by them, so you're going to throw out your husband or your wife so that you can meet the new thrill, who probably dumps you in no time. That's just a little addition from me. He didn't write that. Many people think you should try to make divorce difficult for everyone. So it's Christians, he's saying, are the ones that sometimes think that. But he's saying, I don't really think that. The reason why he doesn't think that is that churches really need to recognize the fact that the majority of people aren't Christians, and they can't live by the same principles that Christians are expected to live by. And then he goes on to say there should be two kinds of marriage, civil marriage and religious marriage. There should be, and there is, one governed by the state, and it has all its rules concerning its citizens for marriage, and the other governed by the church with its rules. And there is something else even more unpopular to deal with in Christian marriages, and that's the Christian wives' promise to obey their husbands. Yeah, I know all about that. In Christian marriage, the man is the head. Two questions are obvious. Why should be the head at all? Why the man? And why not equality? And why, like I said, the man? The need for some, then it goes on to say, the need for some head follows from the idea that marriage is permanent. As long as the husband and wife are agreed, well, then there's no real problem. There's no question. And there's no need to have a head. That subject doesn't even arise. We hope that this will be the normal state in a marriage. And in some marriages, it probably is. I went reasonably long periods of times where we were happy, and that wasn't the case, or there wasn't a state of problems that we had to have a head to make the decisions. But when there is a real disagreement, then people talk it over. And when they have already done that and they still fail to reach agreement and they can't decide by a majority vote because there's two of them, and one of the two things really need to happen at that point. They either have to separate and go their own ways, or one of them must have a casting vote. And this all seems so logical. Okay, and one needs to have the power of deciding. You cannot have a permanent association without a constitution. Even a woman who wants to be the head of her own house does not admire the same state of things when going on in next door. Interesting. She is more likely to say that poor Mr. So-and-so, and why does he allow her to do these things? That appalling woman, and she's always bossing him around. This is all more than I can really imagine. I do not think that she's very flattered if anyone mentions her own headship. Like I said at the beginning, she wants to be head, but she doesn't admire the woman next door who does that to her husband. There must be something unnatural, the rule of wives over husbands, because wives themselves are half ashamed of it, and they despise their husbands whom they rule. Years ago, I heard something by Chuck Swindoll, I think it was, that said he said something like, once a woman rules over her husband, she gets him to be where she wants, then she can't stand him anymore. Well, I think that's probably the truth. The relations of the family to the outer world, and that's really, he's saying, is the foreign policy in a marriage, and he says it depends mostly upon the man. He gives some interesting reasons for doing that, and he's kind of the foreign relations to the outside world. And then he supports his position, which is interesting. He says a woman is fighting for her own children, whereas the husband against the rest of the world. And a woman she's the special trustee of the interests of her family. And the man has the last word to protect other people from the intense family patriotism of the wife. That's a very interesting statement. He's saying that, in other words, he's really saying that the wife is liable not to be fair because she will protect her children even when her children are wrong. And the husband is more likely, that's what he's saying, to look at it from the total point of view of everybody involved. And then he says, if anyone doubts this, they need to ask themselves a simple question. If you were a married woman, much as you admire your husband, would you not say that his chief failing is his tendency not to stick up for his rights and yours against the neighbors as vigorously as you would